Hey there guys, how's it going? We've got a rare clear night and I've just finished performing some maintenance tasks on my new Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope. It needed its corrector plate realigning, and now that that's finished, my scope really needs recollimating. It's quite far out, and I thought that after a few people asked me would I be able to show you a run through of collimation, I decided I was going to record the whole thing live for you right here, and I'll show you exactly what I do to get my scope into a fine state of collimation. Now you can apply this to Schmidt-Cassegrain telescopes and also to Maksutov Cassegrains, and even if you've already got your secondary aligned to a Newtonian, you can use this same kind of thing to finish off a star test. Now, the way that I'm actually going about things right now, I've got my telescope pointed south in the observatory, just out there to a well-elevated star. You take your pick of whatever suits for you, and then effectively with everything in place, just I'm going to use it for my normal imaging session. So the camera, the off-axis guider, the reducer in my case as well, all bolted down, ready to go. I'm going to open up SharpCap, start a live loop, and actually take a look at this thing's collimation state as is. So on the screen right here, we have the star. I'm just going to turn on the crosshairs for a moment. We're currently using 2000 milliseconds, so 2 seconds looped exposures, just so we can see the star, and it's quite close to center. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to actually go down to a smaller region of interest to get us started with this. So I'm just going to go 1024 by 768. Hopefully we can still see the star, and as you can see, we can indeed. And then I'm going to actually try to move the star towards the center. So east is the right direction for me there a sec. Let's try north. So north's the wrong direction by the look. So east and south is going to be very close for me, and then a little dab west. Now it's just about centered. I'm going to go ahead and start to defocus the star. So I'm going to move in a positive direction. You can't see on my screen right here, but just the EAF controls in SharpCap. If you don't have an EAF, just do this manually. Move your focus until you're actually cleanly out of focus. So I'm going to now move down my exposure until I can start to see, hopefully, a donut on this thing. It'll all make sense as to what I'm talking about in just a moment. So a quarter of a second, still too fast. 125 milliseconds, so I'll get in there. 62.5, and I can just start to see the edge of a donut appearing. So I'm going to turn off this reticle now so we can get a clearer view of what's going on. Drop the gain ever so slightly and keep moving this focuser in a positive direction for now. So a couple more steps, you can see the stars getting larger and larger and more out of focus. You can see there's a bit of wind as well, causing some incredibly bad seeing disturbances as hot air is taken out of my observatory right here and swept over the end of the telescope. Not ideal conditions, but we will still be able to collimate this thing even as is. And just another little push. So that's far enough out of focus, I would say now. It's well visible on the screen. And with just a little boost in gain, hopefully if I just shut the door for just a moment, I don't need to actually, it's just gone clear enough. You can see the star is down and to the right, off from center for us. So let's just get this view clear for just a moment, stop this heat escaping from the room. You can hopefully see the secondary shadow, that's this dark donut right here, is pushed well across to the right and down in my case. So it's way out of collimation. If I just take it slightly further out of focus, this should become even more simple for you guys to see what I'm talking about. But right there, hopefully that's far enough that you can see what I'm talking about here. A small increase in gain is going to brighten things up for us. You can see you can go too bright and it starts to become even harder to see what's going on. You can also go too dim, of course, and you can't really see what you're doing. I just want to demonstrate that for you. It seems obvious, but I want to go through the whole thing so that someone watching can actually just copy exactly what's going on. Now the first thing I'm going to try and do is I'm going to go out into the observatory, and using my hand in front of the aperture of the telescope, I'm going to try and identify whichever screw on my secondary collimation bolts aligns closest with this region right here where it's the tightest. You can hopefully see that if we were to cut this thing in two, we'd get symmetry about there. in that kind of plane, right? So this is the tightest, this is the largest area, and I'm going to try and tighten this area. So it should hopefully push the secondary mirror away from that spot by tightening the bolt, because it's going to tip it away, if that makes sense. So I'm going to keep this rolling. Hopefully you're going to be able to see what happens. So I'm going to put my hand in front and start to make a small adjustment. You should still be able to hear me throughout this, as I've got a secondary mic running. And up my step I go. And now with just my hand in front, hopefully you can start to see the shadow of my hand appearing. So whatever's closest to here is what I need. So I can see it's actually somewhere between these two bolts. So I could either loosen the far bolt or tighten the two that's closest to me. And I'm going to go with tightening the two that's closest to me a little. So I'm just going to go until it's about to go off the screen for a second. Might wonder, is this too much of an adjustment to make in one? And as you can see, no, it's still effectively very much on axis. If you look at this small red box up there, that's the size of the portion of sensor that we're looking at. So this is very much still really completely on axis adjustments. So I'm going to move this, should be west and north. I keep getting myself mixed up with this, eh? The west and north. Now we're back roughly central, and I can continue on with those adjustments because it was the right direction. We just didn't have enough play. We would have lost the star off the screen. So for maximum accuracy, when we get it a little bit closer, we do want to be trying to focus on keeping it towards the center, truly on axis. But for now, it's so coarse that we can continue on as we are. So I'll show you once again. You can see it's that same adjustment really that he's making. So these two bolts, a little touch here and here, and once again. And we are starting to get a little bit closer now. It looks like it's still tight here perhaps. So one more movement on the second of those bolts. With that you can start to see now that secondary shadow is getting much more neatly aligned. So just push this in the right direction once again. It's looking closer now. It's still tight where I mentioned, so we found right away really the adjustment that needs doing. This is still the smallest portion, so I'm going to continue on tightening those two. They don't feel too tight yet. I would advise if things start to feel, you know, kind of groaning under tension, definitely undo other collimation bolts. But I'm using Bob's knobs right now, so finger tight collimation bolts. Really the risk of stripping threads and such is just about nil. So I'm going to continue on with a process of tighten in my case until I'm closer. So right, back out. Let's continue on with this. So that same adjustment, small tighten here and here, and we appear now to be getting pretty close. I would say that secondary shadow is lining up fairly well. And now at this point I'm going to try to increase my accuracy very slightly by decreasing the size of the region of interest. So we're forcing ourselves to be completely truly on axis for all of these adjustments. So maybe 640 by 480 or something like that would be great. I can increase my zoom just a touch so it's still visible for me out in the observatory. Let's go ahead and get things centered just back up a little bit. Turn down this speed now as it's starting to get a little bit jerky to control. South's the wrong direction. I keep making that same mistake. And now it's just that touch closer. You can see that central pip. I'm going to try and bring it so that we've got this starting to get very close towards the central shadow. So we need to take it now in a negative direction for this. And when we are done, I'm going to kind of verify collimation by passing it through and checking on the opposite side. So going from intra to extra focal, or well, I think we're actually extra focal right now. Doesn't really make much odds. As long as you can see this pattern, you'll know you're on the right side. So don't worry too much about it. Now, I'm going to get this just a little bit closer. As you can see now, the edges, there's real bad seeing effects going on, but the edges are starting to become too bright to really distinguish, so I'm going to have to turn down the gain. It's a constant little game of cat and mouse, effectively, where you're wanting to see what's going on, but also have it bright enough to continue monitoring your adjustments. And now we're close enough that we need to really wait for a moment of better clarity. So I'll just push my door slightly for a second. And hopefully this will settle. And yes, it looks to me like we still need to move slightly in that same direction. So this edge ring is cleanly visible around the opposite side of the adjustments that we've been making. But if you can see here, it's still crammed together on the side where we have been making the adjustments, indicating it's too tight. You can also see that this central spot, if you can make that out, is closer to this side than to this side. So we just need to continue on with those same two adjustments. Now, if you can find, by the way, that let's say if I held my hand up and the shadow was perfectly aligned, let's say right edge for the sake of argument, and you had a bolt lined up on that, you need to just move one bolt. It becomes very simple at that point. But as it fell between two bolts, I had a choice to make between a compound adjustment of two bolts or loosening off an already quite loose, I would imagine, opposite bolt. Hope that makes sense. But I'm going to go out now and try to make this next adjustment a little bit further. So the same two bolts. As you can see, I don't want to be adjusting around here or anything. See my hand's shadow moving around? It's these two. They're getting fairly tight now, which is good. It's going to mean that the collimation has got every chance of really holding, which is what we want. I can sort of see we need to make a slight further adjustment, I think, with both. Can make that out even at this range, really. It's looking closer. So let's try and adjust based on what this pattern shows now. Looking pretty good. Getting fairly close. As you can see, that band I was just talking about is now visible basically the whole way around. But that central spot, if we just wait for the view to settle a little bit, we really need to, you know, do this on a calmer night with less thermals. But, you know, I'm trying to get ready before an imaging session, basically. So I don't really have too much time to devote to this, but I want it to be collimated. So, you know, all the same, it's best to take a little bit of time with this. Looks like it's closer to the right hand side to me. Once the viewing set, close the door slightly again. Sources of heat nearby are a bit of a nightmare, of course, and my office here is no exception. And yeah, I think anybody watching this could probably agree the rings are more stacked on the right hand side than they are on the left, and that central spot is tighter to the right than it is to the left. So I need to now locate whichever bolt it's going to be, which means that I can tighten to push this away, or loosen to pull it that way, if you like. So I'm going to use my hand shadow trick again, and let's find out. So I'm looking to make this further away with the tightening movement. So let's try and locate that. So the right is tight. So with my hand shadow, I can see I need to move just one bolt now. I'm in this situation. Unfortunately, it is lined up perfectly with what I need to do. So there's two small nudges on that bolt. Can't really stress to you enough how small some of these nudges need to be now that it's very much practically in collimation. But you know, all the same, as boring as this might be to some people, I know that if the first time I was trying to collimate, if someone had done this, it would have helped me. So I hope it's in the same situation for you guys. Now, this is looking extremely close, I will say. I'm going to just wait and monitor for a moment now and see if I can see any sort of oddity in the pattern emerging, but it looks like most of what we're seeing in terms of differences. You know, you can observe a wider ring on this side and then think, oh, this is tight, but then you wait a moment, the scene changes slightly, and now that looks wider. So we're now collimating beyond what the scene is able to give us, I would say. So I'm going to move in a negative direction, get slightly closer still towards focus. You can see what I mentioned about those rings again becoming too bright. So again, just chase with the gain very, very slightly. And this is a really good sign, by the way. Now I'm approaching focus. That central dot is remaining central. It doesn't look like it's biased too far to one side or the other. Now we're getting very close in terms of focus, and the scene's not really allowing us to make the most of this, but it now looks, to me, very slightly like I need to make another small tightening adjustment to shove that white dot just slightly away from this right hand side. Hopefully you can see what I'm talking about. This, I could well leave it alone, but you know, for the sake of trying to demonstrate the adjustments that we're making, I will go ahead and try and make that adjustment. So the same bolt that I just used, I located it a moment ago, which needs a very, very slight tighten. And I would say, looking at this now, we're nearly in focus. The test becomes more and more sensitive, of course. It looks like the opposite bolt as well, just the one closest to the bottom, I'll locate that with my hand as well. Needs also a very slight tighten. So we're becoming tremendously close. These are going to be, I don't know, a 32nd of a turn or something like that. You know, tiny, tiny adjustments. And let's go ahead and see what we can do if we can get that spot to become slightly more centralized. Don't mind me just kicking stuff. So, we already determined we need a slight tighten on that bolt, and now with the shadow of my hand, hopefully you can see that it's now appearing at 6 o'clock, and with that I've got my finger on the right bolt that I need to tighten. And this has just turned out nice that all of these have just needed tightening. There's still plenty adjustable just by hand. But we should have a very stable collimation now. As, of course, if it's not tightened down, just slewing around the night sky can cause things to move around more than you would like. Looks like the mouse just settling a moment there. I'll pull this back as close on axis as I can. You can see with the crosshair, we're really not far off at all. And as I mentioned before, just looking at the size of the field of view from the sensor, we are collimating on axis with this. It's important that you do that and don't let the stars skate around all over the screen, otherwise you will be chasing your tail forever. You'll never collimate your telescope. It has to be done on axis or as close as you possibly can in the center. Looks like another very, very tiny adjustment on both of those bolts, and I think we'll have this nailed down. Actually, it is close. I am tempted to leave it, but I think I'll just try and tweak it very, very slightly. And a tiny touch on that one. You can see when I make an adjustment, it makes it move on the screen, of course, and that's because we are tilting that secondary mirror and thus altering the spot at which it reflects the star's intensity onto my sensor. So these are really minuscule adjustments at this point. The central spot is looking extremely close to perfect. I'm going to continue on and move through focus. If I could see that central, it's still there in the middle, so I'm happy at that. Continue on through the opposite side of focus. It's good to verify, if possible, both sides. Hopefully you can see. That looks pretty promising, eh? Got those nice concentric rings going all the way down towards the center. the seeing is the biggest disturbance that we're viewing right now, I would say. What's making this slight elongation of the black ring right there is now starting to appear at the top, and then it's gone again. I think we are just about critically collimated. I could spend more time, I think, and chase this around, but for the sake of just the video, I'll call the video now, and then I'll go ahead and maybe make a few very, slight final tweaks off camera when I'm not going to be wasting your time, but I may well just leave it. Actually, it does look really good right now, and I think if you just bring it back through and make sure nothing's shifted whatsoever, we can call this done, and hopefully someone might enjoy seeing a live collimation get done. You know what I mean? It hasn't taken too long. I've been running for about 20 minutes or so, so not too bad, and with any luck, as I say, should have been useful. So looks good. I am actually going to leave that alone, and I'll wrap things up with that. So as always, guys, thanks very much indeed for your support, and I hope you've enjoyed seeing this one, and I will hopefully be on with plenty more content soon to share with you also. Until the next one, look after yourselves. Thanks again, and cliss, guys.